Hello and welcome to today's Claimversation. My name is Ashley Sneller and I am joined by this wonderful panel. I'm going to go ahead and have everyone introduce themselves to you and tell you a little bit about why they care about claims. Krista, can you kick us off?
Sure. So I'm Krista Eger. I'm the head of product here at Benekiva. I care about claims because I came from claims. I mean, that's what got me into this industry. I started back in early 2000 in the insurance industry and just kind of worked my way up to claims. But I knew right away that claims was where I wanted to be. So I was on the carrier side, but now that I'm on the vendor side, I still feel like I can deliver on that promise that I did when I was a claims examiner. So I enjoy being that, hopefully some light in a dark time for beneficiaries and for our customers. And even though I'm not the one that's actually picking up the phone anymore, I'm glad that I can still do that. So I'll pass it over to Jes.
I'm Jes Vargas. I am the Director of Product Solutions at Benekiva. I care about claims because unlike Krista, I did start in claims. That was my first role in the insurance space. So kind of reversed. I started in claims and then I moved into the tech space and worked more in kind of servicing and new business and other roles. But now I'm back in claims. So once you're kind of in it, you're always in it in some respects, and you do come back. So that's the way, at least we see it happen most often. So I'm happy to be here with you all today and to have this conversation. Tim, pass it to you.
Sure. I'm Tim Jordan, and I am the enablement manager here at Benekiva. But basically, I've been in claims for maybe about 18 years, and it's been a passion. Before it was just a job, but a couple of years in, it really became a passion because it's like Krista said, it's when people are struggling, they need the most care, and it's hard to really make sure it's not just a business transaction. So it's been my passion to figure out how we can make that the most meaningful to the beneficiaries who are dealing with claims or the insured's owners for other types of claims as well. So it's been something I've been involved on the claim processing side for years, and then moved over to the system side through other various roles. But it's nice to stay engaged, like Jes said, stay engaged with the claims to figure out how we can make that experience better, because sometimes it's not great, and we're doing what we can to make it better.
Yeah.
Kristen, what about you?
Hi, I'm Kristen Crook. I'm the Director of Client Success. And I have been in insurance claims my whole life with like customer service, healthcare, and then property. And I have the privilege to manage a team to get into life claims. And that's where it really just opened up for me, is like Jes said, once claims is always claims, because you're dealing with the hardest moments and the actual physical, or the people that they love the most, not just the physical, but you know what happens to the ones we love the most. And once you get in, you get hooked and you want to help that person in any way possible. So I've been on the carrier side like Krista has as well. And now I'm over here on this side, which is the best side in my opinion, because we have a product that actually helps them and can, you know, really speed things up and work with the process and just make it a lot less overwhelming for examiners and clients.
Love it. Thank you guys for joining today. Really excited for the conversation. So just for context setting, in Claimversations, we always talk about the intersection of people, processes, and technology, and how those all come together to make the claim experience the best it can be for the claimants, but also for the examiners. And so today we have a special treat because we have people who've lived it over many years in different kinds of products. And so today the focus is going to be what it's like to be an examiner day to day, living in it, and how processes and technology makes that better or worse, and just what the experience is like, so that we can think about what we need to do moving forward. But I would just want to dig right into the first question, and Kristen, I'll start this one with you, but everyone add in. What is something about being a claims examiner that people outside of claims don't really understand or see?
That's a really good question. I remember when I first started, I didn't have a lot of experience with claims, and I sat down with the examiners. I had no idea how many applications that they had and what goes into paying one death claims. It is overwhelming. There are so many different things that go into that. You think, I just thought, oh, you have a life insurance, someone passes away and you just pay it out, no big deal. But you've got to look at policies, beneficiaries, state regulations, guidelines, documentation. It's just overwhelming. And for someone who doesn't know, you have to learn that whole process. It's so much goes into it. Examiners are rock stars because I don't know how they do it. It's just, it takes a lot.
And then, I mean, on top of that, you also have the beneficiaries who might or might not understand the complications that you're coming through on the claims. So you also have to deal with, yes, we have to do these certain regulatory things, but you also have to deal with the empathy on the client side, because everybody you're dealing with has gone through some sort of loss, which makes it hard.
Mhm.
It seems like the hardest part is you have so much complexity internally that the people you're talking to don't care. They just want to get what their family needs, and having to manage that tension all the time.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like you almost have to have like, you have to be almost like a lawyer and an accountant and all these different things too, because I know that was like one of the craziest things when I was going through my training to become a claims examiner, and I started having to learn about estates and trusts and wills and like all of these different things to try to go through all the documentation and understand it. And, like testamentary trusts and stuff like that, like were the most like complicated thing, just to understand the difference of it. And then of course my family then comes in and is now, that's the thing. I am now the go-to person for everything wills, and everything is, that is now my role in the family. But you have to kind of become like this little expert in all these little things in order to just adjudicate a claim. Like, yes, you do have other areas to reach out to, actuaries and things like that, but you have to know a little bit about a lot, right? In order to be able to just go through the process, right? And I think that stuff, it's not as cut and dry as just looking at a document and seeing a name and saying that's the person. It's not as easy as that, right?
And they really have to read through the policy. You have to read through it and understand, what does this mean? What does this not? And this has been for changes. And the handwriting from
the handwriting from the 30s. Yeah. No.
It's like, what does this say?
And the microfiche. The microfiche. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What kinds of situations do examiners encounter that people would be really surprised by?
I think that one is that people don't really know, kind of like what we just talked about, is like they don't really understand what a trust is, what an annuity is. I only knew what an annuity was because I have one, but I've never heard that before until, what is this? But what does that mean? And then after working with examiners, I went back to my annuity to reread it, to understand, like, what does this mean? It surprised me the most that the lack of knowledge there is. And like, where do you find that? And people, it's hard to go to an agent nowadays to find them. Where do you do that? Is online, but how do you get that knowledge? I think it surprised me the most.
I think also the amount of interactions that you have that aren't necessarily involved in the carrier side, the police departments you have to talk to, the coroner reports that you have to read. So all the different things that you're exposed to as well as a claims examiner.
Yep.
And to be able to read that, and some of that stuff is hard to read. It can be gruesome at times or just complicated. I think it takes a special examiner to be able to go through that and read through that too. Is surprising.
I always found it so fascinating. I think I'm probably one of the edge cases that found it so fascinating to like read the details of that. But
dreams of being SIU examiner.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if I never went into the role that I was, that's where I wanted to go. I wanted to go from claims to SIU because naturally a claims examiner is investigative. So a lot of that of your role is investigating things like that.
I mean, you call yourself weird for that, Krista, but I feel like of all of the claims examiners I've spoken to, that's pretty, like, we all wanted to be Sherlock Holmes, or like everyone wanted to be a detective when they grew up, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I guess piggybacking off of that, thinking to, reading these reports, or, you have to deal with some gruesome information in moments. What are some of the really challenging conversations that claims examiners have to have day to day? I'd say with claimants, but even with people like police departments or the other parties involved.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many different ways that you can have that challenging conversation. I mean, when I think back, it's always that spouse that's calling and they're crying because they have no idea what to do next. I mean, I don't know how many conversations I had where it was a husband that's like, my wife took care of everything. I don't even know where to sign. How do I do this? So then you have that type of conversation. Then you have the conversations that are you're telling them that they're not the beneficiary, or you're declining their claim because of material misrepresentation. That's the one thing that I remember. It was anytime you got a phone call on a specific claim, especially if it was one that had some complexities to it, it was kind of dragging on for whatever reason. Whenever the phone would ring and you would hear that it was for that claimant, your heart would drop a little bit, because you knew that whatever it is that you're going to encounter was going to be a difficult conversation. And that's just from the beneficiary's perspective. Then you also have to work with the agents, who are also now acting as the middleman between you and the beneficiary. So you have to re-explain yourself to the agents. And then internally, having to plead your case for why we should pay this claim, or even why we shouldn't plead this claim. So you have to be able to kind of separate yourself. It's almost like being in the medical industry. You'll find that a large number of people that get into claims were in the medical industry or planning. I was going to become a nurse. And you have to be able to shut that piece of you off, but also still keep the empathy for that conversation as well.
I think okay, Tim.
It's interesting what you said, shut part of you off and keep empathy. Because when I first got into claims, the first 6 months I was in claims, miserable, absolutely miserable. It just, I couldn't handle it, because it was death claims specifically that we were working on. And it just got so heavy. Every day I would read, 20, 30 death certificates about all these people that died, and everyone's a story of somebody dealing with loss. And it gets really heavy. Like you said, it's just very intense. And so you have to actually learn, you know what, this is a loss. I need to have sympathy, but it's not my loss. I need to be able to continue with this business transaction while still having the empathy to realize that somebody has lost somebody. I just, like you said, kind of shut yourself off from that particular thing, but still keep your empathy, which is the biggest challenge.
I think too with that is the examiners too, they'd have conversations with themselves, and it's hard. You could feel the weight on their shoulders, if they just got off a call. And say, I felt as my role as a manager is, what can I do to help them when they went through that emotional call? Like, let's get up, let's go talk about it. Let's walk around the building, let's be there for each other. I think that was really good teamwork to have. If somebody did have a rough call, how do we support them? Because they're to be next, and what do we learn from that? And you have to have those conversations together as a team and learn from that. And it is hard. It is very hard to have that.
I still remember having a claim where it involved a child and having to talk to that parent. And when I got off the phone that day, I just, you felt it. Like you kept it. So it's a matter of keeping it together for the sake of the person that you're speaking to. But then also you can break down when you go through it afterwards. And I distinctly, as you were talking about it, it just popped into my head. I remember that day very clearly.
It leads into another topic that we've talked about before, but burnout, right? I mean, how do you not burn out? Tim, you could have, if you'd stayed in that not being able to separate place, but you guys are encountering really, really hard stuff all the time, back to back. So Jess, I'll pass this one to you first, but how do these challenging communication situations, or just hard life things, contribute to burnout? And what do you do to mitigate it?
Right. Well, because it's emotional labor, right? Like we're all saying, it's incredibly hard work. And I think it's hard because you're dealing with this. It's not a normal transaction, right? That you're on the phone with these people, and you're talking to somebody, and sometimes it's like the worst day of their life. Like they might have just left the funeral home, and they're dealing with literally their spouse's remains or their child or something like that. And I know that, for example, I when I was working as a claims examiner at one point, we had a rotating claims escalation line, right? And there were 2 or 3 of us on for 3 hours a day, and we alternated. But by the time that the calls got to us, they had already gone through the contact center, and they had gone through a couple different layers of contact center. So by the time they got to us, it had gotten to a point where there was a reason that they had gotten to us, right? And that call line was pretty packed. So we were just getting call after call after call of just very frustrated people, right? So a lot of the time, it was 3 straight hours of just people crying and people just didn't know what to do, and very complex questions, things where it wasn't just what's the status of what's going on, right? It was very heavy for 3 hours. And you also had a caseload volume that you were supposed to be keeping up at the same time, right? So you have your claims in front of you that you're supposed to be processing, but then you have 3 hours of calls going on, and you're supposed to be doing all these things at the same time. When you finally get off the 3 hours of calls, you're just supposed to go back into that mode, right? And it's just, you can't do that. Like Kristen's saying, like, you need to get up and leave. You need to go walk around and do something. It's just completely like, you can't just go back into that mode. It's impossible. And I think that if you don't, it just starts to compound and compound and compound if you don't have that kind of like break, right? But I think that there's also where it gets a little bit complicated, and especially like now we see a little bit more of a switch of this happening, is like the generational change. At least what I've been kind of observing is because we have a whole generation of people kind of coming up in claims that communicated completely differently, right? Where they grew up communicating differently. They didn't grow up talking on the phone all the time. Like we used to pick up the phone and talk all the time. They're growing up texting and stuff like that. They're not, their go-to isn't just to pick up the phone. So them having that same experience as I do, whereas I did as a claims examiner, is going to be much, much harder. And they're going to have a high rate of turnover and frustration, more so than even we did, you know? And I think that there needs to be a different prioritization or something put on this, you know, the human conversation, how we're evaluating what needs to be human conversation versus any kind of other method of it. There's just, it's a pretty substantial factor in the contribution to burnout. The communication part was very, very difficult for me. That last job with the rotating escalation line was my last claims position. That was very, very difficult for me. Just to be honest, it was rough. Yeah, it was very rough.
I think along with that is like going back into the process, like after you get up a call, you know, you have to get up and move around, but there's so much like, by like time limits and things. Like we had payments. I remember every Friday night, every Friday afternoon, by 3 o'clock, we need these payments in, and there could be like 50 in there, and you, another person, we're just trying to pump through them, but you have to have it right. And if you get a call, a sad call, escalation call, it just jostles you. And then you're like, you have to go right back into approving this. And there's the pressure. The pressure is so real, because you have to get that done. If you don't get it done, we don't want to get in trouble. And so it's a lot on the examiners to like, get up, get this, get that. They're not robots. They're human beings, people. And I think that was the biggest thing. That's what I saw, is like this, we've got to do what we can to help them and get up, walk around, and we'll get the payments in, but the examiner matters the most.
Yeah.
I guess taking that a step further, and Tim, I'll start this one off with you. Thinking about all of that, like holding it all on a plate of all the complexity and all the things that an examiner holds, what would you want leadership or executives to know or see into what a claims examiner does?
Well, I think Kristen said it pretty well in the last part. It's just so much pressure because, and I get it, because there's costs. You want to manage your costs everywhere, so you don't want to overhire, so you have all these people who can do the things, but then you're paying all this money for these people to do it. So you've got that pressure that's coming in to say, you know what, we've got to get X amount of claims done. We've got X amount of people. So just get them done. But then, like Jes said, like Kristen said, you got those calls that you've got to explain something to somebody, and they might not appreciate the fact that you're saying no, or the way a claim is particularly going. And so that's just an emotional pressure on top of also the time crunch that you've got already coming on. So the complexity of just handling the quantity that's coming through, as well as the emotional pressure that's coming through, is hard. So when you have, for example, when I process claims, I think there were at least 5 different admin systems, depending on what type of claim it was, that you could potentially have to go out and touch and know how to work. Each one built by a different company, different way of processing things. So you had that, and then we had a couple of different claim systems, depending on which admin system fed into which claim system. So it's just, you have the the productivity, you've got the emotional stress, and then you've got the complexity of all these different systems that you just have to know, because otherwise you're spinning your wheels to no good. So it's a lot of cognitive load that you just have to deal with as a claims processor, and having to know all those different systems and all the different, like we talked about in the beginning, the regulatory, the compliance, the knowledge that you have to apply as you're going through each one of these different systems to just do one claim.
Well, and the pressure of being on the phone and having them ask you a question, you're literally having to key and toggle through to try to get them one answer because you're trying to find where they are in the system. I remember being in that world. That was the worst because you're just trying to find where their policy is. And they're like, can you not find, what you're looking for? And you're just like, like that's the worst place to be in. You know what I mean? Like, I know you know what I'm talking about. That's horrible because there's no other way to do it. Right. That's the only method. You just have to go through and you're keying and F keying through systems trying to just find their policies.
Yeah, they're asking you what they think are basic questions of hey, just tell me this and tell me that, and you're like, okay, the question you just asked requires me actually to go to a different system than I was just in to get you this answer.
Yeah.
And
I'm
it's all
trying to say, is my policy active? Okay, well,
why do I
that's
have to calculate
question,
this?
right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm going a little off book here, but I feel like the theme that keeps coming up is examiners have enough complexity. We've got to make it simpler.
Mm-hmm.
How do you make it simpler?
Modernize. Streamline.
Give them the tools. If you have the right tools, it takes that pressure off. If you have the right tools and they have time for those phone calls and the extra projects and things that they can do to go outside, go out of their way. I think that's the biggest thing is like when you want to help someone, if you can even go the extra step and follow up with a phone call or send out something that they need, then they're like, oh my gosh, thank you for doing that. Like you didn't have to do it. I always want my examiners do something that you can go the one more step ahead just to make them feel better or do the right thing. It's just, you get that better response of like, oh my gosh, thank you. And it shows just how much we actually cared about it because examiners really do. It's a hard job. And if they're doing this job because they want to do it, because they care. Like we said, once you're in claims, you're always in claims because they really want to do the right thing. And if you give them the right tools and they have enough time to do it, you can have really great customer service.
I think it's also reviewing processes. One of the things that I've seen working at every carrier is all of the claims examiners are doing a lot of busy work. They're updating spreadsheets, they're having to hand type letters, they're having to do things that take away their focus on the complexities that they need to be managing. So in order to simplify that process or to simplify their job, you need to look at those processes and simplify those. Still make sure that you're doing, what it is, you're sending out that letter or whatnot, but you're taking away some of that busy office work that needs to happen so they can focus on the things that matter.
Right.
Just the simple fact of having to enter in some field of data into 3 different systems. That, like Krista said, if you just look at the process, you'll find out where you can kind of reduce that cognitive load on your examiners pretty quickly.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
It seems like too, it just matters to have conversations with the right people too. It's one thing to look at a dashboard and see throughput or time or something, and it's another to talk to your examiner or your leadership for claims and ask more questions to get a little deeper of what's actually going on too underneath the surface.
Can't just look at their numbers and say, well, everybody's meeting their target, so everything's fine. Well, no, because they're under an insane amount of pressure, and yeah, they might be meeting their targets, but at what cost, right? Like,
Yep.
I always think it's great if leadership came and actually sat and shadowed with an examiner for hours, not just 30 minutes. Like you need to spend a day down there to really understand what the department does, and then you'll learn and can see exactly what's really going on. And it kind of opens up your eyes, for sure.
It's huge. All right, I know we're coming up on time. So as we come in for a landing, my favorite part is always to ask rapid fire questions. So I have, looks like 4 for you back to back. Just say the first thing that comes to mind. Best part about being an examiner?
DMF. I'm telling you, I loved working the DMF. I loved doing the investigation, but there's nothing better than calling up somebody and saying, hey, I have a $500,000 check for you that you had no idea was there. DMF. And for those people that don't know what DMF is, that's the death master file.
It's very specific.
I would say the customers. I love that. I love the people aspect of it, whether it's the customer, like just helping that person on the phone, because it's, even though how hard it is, that's my favorite part of the job, is when you actually get to help somebody and know it's, you did the right thing.
I like solving the puzzles, the really, really nitty gritty stuff, those really weird handwritings on those applications where you have to really get in there. I like that stuff.
I would have said something opposite to what Krista said, but making that phone call to say, hey, we've got money that you don't know about is really fun. So I guess DMF as well, but I hated working it.
Yeah, I hated working those files. They were awful.
I love that. I guess, okay, that leads in, well, you can use this for your next answer if you want, but hardest part of being an examiner.
It's the phone calls.
Ugh.
It's difficult conversations that we've spoken about. That's the hardest part, and trying to maintain your level of work that you need to maintain that the company is requiring you to.
I think it was, for me, having responsibility for communicating the outcome of the claim without having control over everything that's affecting the outcome. So like the systems, all the documents and stuff like that, but having to communicate the outcome, that was the hardest part. All the systems, all the vendors and everything like that, and how long it took for things, but having to basically answer for all of that was rough. I'm
going to be real honest. Mine was calculating interest. Manually, I'm like 365 divided by 2.15. Or I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And we had to do that for get the calculator out. And I'm like, there has to be better math than that. I am not a mathematician, but I can do it. But it took me a minute. But I mean, you have the pressure. We got to get this done by Friday, and I'm double checking this authority, and you've got big sums, and that interest, man, that killed me every time.
Mine was time studies / productivity goals. Because they'd say, go ahead and we're going to just time you as you process the claim. Like, well, what type of claim would I do?
Yeah.
All those other things that go into, like, how do you get an accurate time study? I didn't like that.
Yeah, makes sense. Should have been designed by an examiner.
True.
A slightly pokey question, given the AI climate that we are in. What's one thing you would never want technology deciding on its own in a claim?
The denial process when it comes to death claims. I think that's just too sensitive of a claim. There are reasons why you need to deny it, and there's reasons why you kind of overlook having to deny it. And you can't have a system trying to deliver that. You know, it's too important of a claim. So yeah.
Krista stole my answer. Claims. Yeah.
I think any communication outgoing to a customer, I think you have to reread that. Like, I know we do have automated things, but I think it's important to really read, and what is it actually saying to you? What does it mean? Is it client friendly enough? Is it too hardcore? Does it have everything? It's just taking the time to really go back and reread it. You can't do it all. You gotta double check it.
Yeah, I would expand the denial to also be the approval, because I don't know. I have a hard time trusting that you've found all the right rules to say, given this situation, you always pay, or given this situation, you always deny, because it's hard to have 100% hard and fast rules for every single claim situation you're coming across.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then last question. If you ever talk to an examiner, you should ask them this question, preferably when they're not on a live stream. So I'm going to caveat this with public. But what is one of the craziest claim stories you've ever had?
There are so many different stories. I think, without going into details, I think anytime you have something where it's a murder-suicide, or I had a contestable claim one time where we were trying to pay out who we thought was the spouse, and then we found out that the named beneficiary wasn't the spouse. It was actually a mistress, and you have to call and do that. So there's quite a few, but I think those are the first ones that pop to mind.
Yeah, there's a lot that I was thinking about that I couldn't say today, unfortunately. So if anybody wants those, we can have different conversations that, like Ashley said, aren't published or on the phone. But specifically, I had many over the years where people had double lives with children, additional like wives and things like that just were completely unknown, and they were listed in wills and things like that. And I would talk to their first wife or their actual first wife, and they had no idea. There were a lot of very uncomfortable conversations with multiple spouse family situations. Those were always very awkward conversations to have. So yeah,
I think
Remember
mine
there
is,
was, oh, go ahead, Tim.
go for it, Kristen.
Real quick, I was just one where it was the benefit, or he owned the policy, or his girlfriend owned the policy, but he paid for it, but he wasn't a beneficiary. And he thought because he paid for it, he should be the beneficiary. And I was like, oh gosh, that was a hard one to explain. It's like, no, that's not what it is. And it was our kids. He's like, well, I don't understand. I paid for this. I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. But we have to follow the guidelines. So.
Without going into too much details, my favorite one was a very morbid, because we're in claims. We look at things a little differently. The claim was the person had a motorcycle accident, but it turns out the driver of the motorcycle was just fine. And what happened actually is the deer came and hit the passenger, completely missed the driver, and so we paid that claim. But kind of morbid humor. I'm sorry.
Crazy though.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's why I'm saying anyone listening, you should go talk to your examiner friends, because the stories are just beyond what you could believe. But all that to say, guys, thank you for joining me today. I think it matters a lot to hear from people who've processed claims, like what it is actually like, so that we can make it better. Because the better it is for the claims examiner, the better it's going to be for the claimant too. There's so much that an examiner holds. So if you take nothing away from this session, take that away of go check on your claims people, go see how we can make it so they can have more that they can give out of their cup, because their cup's overflowing. But thank you guys for joining today. If any of you have questions about processing or technology or modernization or how to go about these things, we're always open. Please reach out to us, and we will catch you on the next Claimversation. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.